welcome along to another episode of Quality Coffee Break. Myself and Suzy are going to be talking about choosing and selecting your electronic quality management system. How are you doing, Suzy?
I'm great. How are you, Amy?
Very well, thanks. Looking forward to getting this conversation started.
Yeah, this is a really great topic because I think it's one of those things that, a new quality manager, as we've kind of talked about in our other episodes, right? One of our primary audiences, so to speak, for this podcast would be somebody who's new to the role or has, a new level of responsibility. So one of the things I think, especially in a small organization or an early stage organization, is, hey, we've hired this quality manager or quality director. I need you to get us electronic. Like that's going to be a pretty key thing. Once an organization gets to a certain point, it's like, this is the time we need to do this in a more productive way than our paper system. So what do we need to do? How do we get there? How do we get there, Amy? What do we do?
It's a really good question. It's not my first time around the block in terms of choosing and selecting an eQMS. So if I was to do it all over again, I think the first thing is getting your good set of user requirement specifications, your URS. Get your key stakeholders involved straight away. What functionality do they absolutely need? And what sort of functionality would be quite like a nice to have? So not a deal breaker in that respect. And then once you are all in alignment with that, then it's time to start the whole process of typing into your search engine, eQMSs, etc. And then just, talking to sales representatives and start getting lots of demos. But as long as, I'm a firm believer in bringing people along for your journey, because I know Suzy, that people don't really like change, and it is quite a difficult thing to do and to implement. I was always told, getting hearts and minds into an eQMS system is really important, because a lot of people can, sometimes people can be quite averse to big changes such as these. I mean, well, how would you do it, Suzy? What do you think?
Yeah, I think keeping the end user at top of mind while you're going through the process is really important, because it might have all the bells and whistles that you think are great for your needs. But if your, standard employee doesn't find it useful, can't figure out how to use the system, or it's too complicated, then you're not going to have good adoption. You're not going to have good support for moving it forward, etc. So for me, one of the key things that, and as you mentioned, you bring people along, and have it be sort of a team effort in the selection process, which I think is great, but also just bearing in mind that ultimate usability.
It's so key. So one thing I've actually done in the past is, if they offer training before you get a demo that you can play with, they'll just say, no, I don't want to be trained, thanks. I want to see how usable this system is in the first instance. Because if I can't work it out from the get-go, it's too complicated. Because you're always going to have users in your organization which just need to approve a document every now and then. So if it's not going to be apparent to you from the get-go, it's hardly going to be apparent to them if they only need to go in once a quarter, for example. So I think, maybe going against the grain from a quality professional to say, don't get trained. And then just using the system just to see how user friendly it is really important. Yeah, I've had experiences using systems where initially you think they're going to be really good, and then 6 months down the line, then perhaps it's not as user friendly as you would like it to be.
Yeah, totally agree. And then I think it's important to figure out, it goes along with your user requirements, but what do you want this system to do? Because if, in some cases, maybe all you really need or all you really want is a good document control system or a good CAPA system or things like that. But understanding whether you want to just hold those kinds of records or whether you want to also incorporate some like actual data gathering of inspection data or asset management, like calibrations and preventive maintenance, like those are options. So really understanding what it is that you want to get from it, or what do you want from a system, and then auditioning, those different systems that have those capabilities. But I think it's also really important to challenge some of those desires by your team, because I think a natural inclination for people would be, I want everything. I want it to do all the different bits, and I want it to be extremely customizable, and all of those kinds of things. And then the other part of my brain that's also thinking that, like, one part might be thinking about the user's experience, the other part is thinking about how does this get validated and how does it get maintained, because that's going to fall to you a lot of the times. And so with something like ultimate customization, like if you have the ability to change every field name and add fields and do all these things, that means your validation experience is going to be that much more challenging. So my general approach and guideline is make it work out of the box, and with the out of the box validation, and adjust your processes to fit the software as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, it's because also these systems are often updated pretty frequently. So if you've got a eQMS system which is you've customized everything, I remember looking at one system, and a lot of, like, to make a new form, it involved actually coding.
Yeah.
So you can, absolute nightmare. So if you can, like, imagine that, and then they're also updating it every quarter. So by
Oh,
the
okay.
time you've finished one change control, you've got a notification for the next. So essentially, you're left with probably someone in charge of validating your eQMS system constantly.
Yeah.
And I know some people really do enjoy validation, but I imagine that gets pretty boring pretty quickly.
Well,
Just constantly keeping up to date with the validation of your eQMS system. So I think there's a lot to be said for using the functionality out of the box. And obviously, if you've chosen your system correctly, it's going to comply with, requirements of 21 CFR Part 11. It's going to have, document control aspects to support 3405. So it's going to help you out here. So yeah, I agree. If you can use something pretty much straight out of the box to minimize your validation effort, it's definitely key. And then there's also the FCA guidance document, which we'll pop a little link down below, about the validation of automated systems, so GAMP, if you've come across that one. And essentially, the guidance document says, how critical that piece of software is for your quality management system, your manufacturing production line, and it has a really useful method, all based on risk, of course, based on the extent of the validation activities that you undertake. So yeah, we'll pop a little link below for this video, because I think everybody should give that a read, because it's a really helpful document. Yes. Long story short, see if you can use it out of the box.
Yeah. And using it out of the box will basically means that you're accepting the validation that the software manufacturer has, will provide, and they should provide it to you. Like, if they won't give you the records of it, that's not the one for you, because you need to make sure you have that in your files to support that it was tested and validated. So for instance, the eQMS system that I use right now, which I'm not going to name, but is, like, I like it well enough. It is only updated once a year, so that's helpful, because you do, as part of those GAMP requirements, you are required to evaluate the changes in the software sort of before it gets launched, right? But the software that I'm using, they provide us with the full validation documentation, which is great. And then we've only done sort of minimal kind of verification that it's all working effectively. And because the system is all web-based. And the servers are remote. We have chosen not to store the information locally. Now, that's also one of those choices that you will usually get with an eQMS. Do you want it to be on your servers? Do you want it to be on their servers? Web-based, not web-based? Those are all all decisions that you need to evaluate based on your organization's probably appetite for risk, the sensitivity of the work that you're doing. You know, somebody who is like a defense contractor, for instance, may very well have requirements for keeping those on local servers. Whereas, you know, those of us who are working in maybe less sensitive areas, you know, I appreciate that it's just stored remotely because that's less oversight and maintenance that I have to do and that I have to be aware of. So, you know,
Yeah.
as you go
I mean,
through
there's
all of these different options, I thinking about how is it going to validate and what kind of administrative actions do I need to do on an ongoing basis, and like how much work is it for me to keep it going is pretty important.
Oh, it's so important. And you know, if you can find systems which have certification to 27001, so the cybersecurity, is also going to be really handy to support you. You know, making sure that your system, you know, is good enough to support the cybersecurity requirements for your organisation as well. Yeah, I spoke about like sort of periodic updates and testing it before it's released. Now, I've had a mixture of experiences between different systems where there are some systems where you have a sandbox environment, like a test or a test environment. So it's kind of like a copy of your production environment. Now, when you've got like a new upgrade, what they sometimes do is upgrade this test or sandbox environment first so you can have a play around with it, see what it looks like. If you do need to do any sort of verification before it's released, then you can do so. And I've also had experiences where they just don't do that. And I think it's always better if they do offer this kind of sandbox testing environment and they update it before. It's just really good because you get a chance to, you know, maybe just put a document through document control. You know, has anything changed? No, all looks the same. Because as well as trying to get everybody to come along with you on this, people are going to get pretty irritated if things change and they haven't been informed about it. So, you know, that I think is going to really support, you know, quality professionals making sure that an eQMS is usable, and, you know, people don't get those surprises or quite nasty surprises when maybe a button's moved, for example, which, you know, can happen, and I've, you know, had experiences of that as well. So that will be a
Yeah.
definite bonus.
Yeah, I think a sandbox is essential. Not only for that purpose, you know, being able to evaluate new releases, but also I'm coming from the perspective that it's going to be a small group of people who are rolling out and launching the different modules in your eQMS along with the other work that you're doing. And in, you know, so it takes a person, generally somebody in the QA team, to figure out how the module works, be able to write the procedures for it, do the training on it, and having that in a sandbox environment is key. Like it's, I don't know how you do it in a production environment, because then you have like fake records that then you'd have to delete or what have you. Like it just gets a little bit cumbersome. So I'd say that a sandbox is a necessary tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just some systems they update it to their latest software, and some systems just have it all on the same day, which I don't feel is very helpful. But yeah, definitely having a sandbox system is good for both of those things, which I
Yeah.
like.
So Amy,
Um,
who do you think the stakeholders are, the primary stakeholders are that you want to include in the decision making or the evaluation process?
So for me, obviously QA, and then if you have a production line staff, I think getting their involvement, thinking about the processes that you're going to implement into your system as well. So if it is just kind of documents and training, which is the core functionality of most eQMS systems or all eQMS systems, then you're going to want to have obviously QA, and then I would say some departmental representatives, because you're going to want to know how the users are going to feel about this. If you're rolling out other functionality which might support the supplier approval process, for example, you're going to need to have somebody in there to, you know, who owns your supplier approval process. See what their input is. What do they like? What sort of functionality do they want? IT as well. You know, who is going to be maintaining the system? I think sometimes there's a bit of a debate between, is it a QA functionality, or is it more of an IT functionality? I think it's, from my point of view, it's a mixture of the two. So making sure that you've got support from IT where needed, um, and also top management as well, because they really do need to support the implementation of the QMS. So if they're behind it, then it's going to make your job a lot easier to roll that out and get everybody's involvement. What about you, Suzy? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would probably do maybe sort of listening sessions with those folks. What are you looking for? And then when you've got it narrowed down to, let's just say, your top two or three, that's when I would probably invite other people to play in their training environment or the sandbox or something like that. I wouldn't include them in every demo. I wouldn't I don't think that's maybe the best use of their time, but I think they're important stakeholders. The other one that is worth discussing, I think, is finance, primarily because usually these systems have, one of two ways of how they get paid for it, right? You either have a system that charges you sort of X amount of dollars per user or per license, or you have a system that offers you like X amount of active licenses at a time and as many users as you want. So you can have a company of 200 people all have their own login, but maybe only 20 people can be logged in at a time. And so and they'll sell it to you in blocks of concurrent licenses. One cost per each one of those 200 people who have access to it. So depending on the size of your organization and what those costs might be, like that's an important consideration.
What would you say the stages of implementation would be? Like, where would you start? So you've just got, the approval to, purchase and implement your eQMS. It's now, you open up your internet browser, and then you click in the address, you put your login information. What do you do now?
Yeah, I would start with document control because you're probably going to have a number, like probably a bunch of documents that you need to transition into that system. And so hopefully your tool has like a mass import or upload capability. And you can get those documents ready because they'll have expectations that need to be met prior to import. So you might have to go through every single one of your documents and make sure that you have a PDF copy or a Word copy or whatever it might be. So that's where I would start. And then it depends on the size of your team who's helping you launch it, and whether, like, if you have all the resources in the world and you don't want to go live until every single function is active, then that's fine. It's going to take you probably more than a year to get there with every single function, but you'd have to spend time with each one. I would assign that out. I would say, okay, I want you to work on how the kappas are handled. I want you to work on the training. I want you to work on whatever. But if you're in a small group where you just have a couple of people and you've got to do this as part of the rest of your job, I would start with what's easiest. And often I think what's easiest is that document control piece. I don't want to say training is always the easiest, because I think training depends on what the needs are of the system for that to work effectively.
I mean, because some systems allow you to have training quizzes, for example. Others are just like a simple sort of SOP read and understand. So I guess, if you can maybe have at least set up the SOP read and understood element when you are, when you've got your document control section and training at the same time. And then I just think, well, training is one of those things which is constantly being improved and constantly being rolled out. So I always think there's improvements to training. So I think that's another sort of tidbit. Never think you're done, because there's always going to be some process to improve. So you may well think, oh, this is excellent, we're never going to change this. Never say that in a quality environment. But and then you find, oh, actually, this process needs a little update because it's not perhaps as functional as we thought it might be.
Well, I mean, and you learn as you go, right? As you have the system in operation, you realize, oh, this didn't quite work as the way we thought it would, or as seamlessly as we thought it would, and um, so we need to revise our procedures to fit the actual use of the system, or those kinds of things. You're always going to be fine tuning it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think, you need to take a risk-based approach to the modules of which you implement the modules, the world, however your eQMS system likes to call things. Start with documentation controls training and then just kind of roll out for where you are in the business. Perhaps it's got an audit module. So you may want to sort of encompass that within your next rounds of internal audits. So you can get your internal audit plan. So you might want to sort of schedule it with, when you're planning your next year's internal audit schedule. Suppliers, that's obviously a very good thing for eQMS systems to have, but, not as essential as your document control and training. So I think it honestly just comes down to company preference in terms of what they want to implement first. But yeah, definitely document control first.
And then when you talk about something like the Kappa system or non-conforming products or things like that, you will probably also have a choice at that point about whether you are importing things or just starting from scratch. So I recommend to just do a sort of a light switch approach with those kinds of modules, and that anything before this time period was done in the old system, whether that's paper or a different eQMS system, and let them finish out on that system. And then as of this date forward, it's all going to be in the new system. I think there's probably a lot of variety that in systems or data inputs that would make a transition, like an import a transition, more challenging with that kind of module than the document control module. So that's just something else to think about, how you want to do these updates. Is it a rolling change or is it a light switch model? What kind of Amy, what kind of documentation do you think is necessary for to maintain when you're planning and executing on an eQMS launch?
So the big document that speaks to me is QMS documentation, document control, because within that document you are spelling out your controls for document retention. So that's going to be, hopefully, I would imagine, controlled by your eQMS system. So that's how your data is going to be ensured that it's prevented from deterioration and loss, of which we all know is in 1345, section 4. So we need to make sure that we've got the controls adequately written down in your QMS documentation, document control procedure. Obviously your quality manual as well. So those are the big two documents which you're going to have to make sure that you've reflected the need for, reflected the change to an eQMS system from a paper-based system. And if you've got a separate procedure for record control, record management, you're going to want to make sure that you're saying that you accept electronic signatures now. So making sure that is reflected. But yeah, I think that those would be my top three documents, which obviously would need to be updated to make sure that you're reflecting these to the eQMS system. But I would imagine a lot if you've got a QMS which is hierarchical, and then you've got your SOPs and then work instructions which have the more sort of detailed process and workflows. I would suggest that your work instructions are updated to reflect the process in the eQMS system as well. So use screenshots where you can. People are, gonna forget how to do certain things, especially if they're not using it all the time. So having a nice sort of quick reference guide to when you want to update a document, these are the buttons that you need to click, is really helpful in order to really help your staff along with the change. Yeah, I would also suggest validation master plan. Every facility will have one, so this needs to be included in your validation master plan as well. So don't forget that even if you are using it outside the box, the validator state still needs to be maintained. So making reference to that documentation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a great sort of list or primer for somebody to get started on an eQMS
Yeah.
and establishing or like starting from scratch, right? If you're going from paper and you don't have anything else and you want to think about what you need for an electronic system, I think that we've covered a lot of the areas that are going to be the most impactful. Is there anything else that you think we should probably help our listeners with is in this sort of world?
I would always say never underestimate planning. Make sure you make enough time for planning, planning the validation, even if it is using it out of the box. So never underestimate the the wealth of a good plan, because that's going to be invaluable as you launch your eQMS system. And also just being patient with people, in training as well. If the supplier offers training, take them up on it and get as many people trained as possible. Especially if you're working for a smaller company, and resources might be quite stretched. The people who obviously built the system and are selling you the system are going to know a lot more about it than you are. So utilize that functionality, utilize those resources where you can. Top
Yeah.
tips.
Absolutely. And the other thing, if you're a very small company and resources are difficult, you may want to consider hiring out a consultant who can focus entirely on launching the eQMS. Like once you've selected it, I think you want to be involved in, I think you want to be responsible for selecting the tool. But if you need help just launching it because, you're a really small team, there are loads of consultants who would be happy to just focus on that work for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, make sure that you, if you can, outsource, because yeah, save you time, save you time and money.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Amy, do we have anything else that we want to share on this subject?
No, I think that's all of it. But do remember, everyone, don't panic. Read your SOP.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.